Money doesn't grow on trees. I happened to go to Wall Street in a bubble in 1968, which became the great, huge, first bubble of my life, my experience. And I was just stunned. And I had grown up in a small Alabama town where there was no money, and money was hard to get.
Wow.
And it wasn't at all easy. And I remember saying, wait a minute, this is not real. And it wasn't real. Fortunately, I survived. But that was probably, I guess, growing up poor. The market doesn't care whether you're rich or poor. If you buy silver, it's going to go higher, whoever you are. Rich people, poor people, whatever kind of people. So yes, a lot of people I know, you talked about Chinese before. Yes, I see Chinese getting their money out of China. But again, that's because nobody wants to have your money trapped in a country. Why would you? Well, you can go in the Middle East, since you were talking about, you go down to the gold souk, gold market. There's a huge gold market in every major city in the Middle East. And there are all these mainly women down there buying gold and silver. I mean, it's astonishing. And I wanted them to take me home with them. They had so much gold. They were not the least bit interested in me. I didn't have any gold and silver like they did. But India is the largest gold market in the world, the largest silver market too, I think. Decades, centuries of its culture and history, and that's the way they work, and that's the way they think. Some of those temples in India have staggering, gigantic amounts of gold down in the base. And by the way, the Indian government is trying to make them sell it. The Indian government is trying to do anything they can to get that gold back in circulation, get the money into circulation, because they know there's gigantic amounts of wealth tied up in gold and silver. I am afraid there may be exchange controls in the U.S. Because when countries start getting into trouble, they do all the standard things. They raise interest rates. They do that sort of thing. They print a lot of money. They try to borrow a lot of money. But when things start going wrong, they blame it on the evil foreigners. Well, it's not our fault. We're good Americans. It's the foreigners. And if we have a war, then there's another reason to have exchange controls or to raise taxes or to confiscate your money. You know, now it's legal in the U.S. for the banks, if they get into trouble, to take your money, your deposits. That is now legal. That is the law. They changed that law a few years ago. Couldn't do that before, but now it's legal that if a bank in the U.S. gets in trouble, they can take your deposit. No, I mean, and the U.S. is not the only country. Poland and other countries have changed their laws too to make this happen. So no, I mean, if you're not familiar, just go back and read. All countries have done it throughout history. They close off more and more. They put on more controls, and it's more and more difficult to be a citizen and an inhabitant of those countries. I was in the UK in the early 60s. And I saw all of these horrible things happening. You know, you couldn't take more than 20 pounds, $30 or $40 outside the country when you left, because they weren't. And this is a country that less than 50 years before had been the richest country in the world. Well, I have learned throughout history that if you invest in a country when it's a catastrophe and you have staying power, you're probably going to be great in 5 or 10 years. Mm-hmm. People will look back and say, gosh, you were smart. How'd you know? Find disasters. And if everything else is okay, often if you invest in those disasters, you come out okay. I mean, if you invested in Germany in 1948, oh my God, you'd still be the richest person you know. There are many, that's an obvious example, but there are many, many others. History is very clear. Find a disaster. I mean, one not that long ago, that when the huge tsunami hit Japan, I was already buying the Japanese market. It was down 75 or 80%. It collapsed. So I started buying the Japanese shares in the middle of the summer. The Japanese market was down to nearly 80% because of the tsunami. I mean, that was the bottom. But and of course, if you invest in a country when it's a disaster, they welcome you. I guess some people say, "Oh, you're exploiting a disaster." On the other hand, the people there say, "Please, we need help. So we love for you to invest here." So yeah, Japan, when the tsunami hit, but it would have been a great opportunity for people. So I have learned, and I guess if you'd invested in Cuba in 1962, you'd still be suffering. So it's not that simple. But I cannot invest in Venezuela now because of U.S. sanctions.
Gotcha.
But I would suspect that if somebody did their homework, they might come out way ahead investing in that particular disaster. Everything was based on gold in the 30s. And that's why, as I said before, they always find a way to take advantage of you, to save them. And that's why they picked on gold back in those days. They didn't pick on silver, they picked only on gold, because gold was the base for the money. Everything was based on gold. It wasn't based on platinum or silver or anything else. It was based on gold. That's why they confiscated the gold. Would they do that again? Of course, they can do anything more, right? Well, I doubt it. It's more likely they're going to take your 401k plan. They've already, in some countries, they've already confiscated retirement plans for the good of the country, for your own good. What they do is they come to you and they say, "Mr. Lewis, this is for your good. I know you've been investing in financial markets, but they fluctuate. So we're going to give you these government bonds, 30-year government bonds. They pay 2%, but it's for your own good. You don't have to worry." Then they take your money. Probably take your retirement plans. They'll probably take all of our retirement plans or other assets like that rather than gold and silver. Gold doesn't do anything. I mean, gold is an asset, yes, but they need your money more than they need your gold. Now, everything is a possibility. I know that you grew up, or I certainly grew up, in the United States of America when it was the land of the free and the home of the brave. And such things that you talk about were inconceivable. But I have seen the U.S. government do what most people would have 100 years ago or 80 years ago would have thought inconceivable. And I know they can do it, and they will do it again. They don't care about you. I want to repeat. They're no more different than the Polish government that your wife grew up under. They look after themselves. I mean, history is very, very clear about this. Whatever they think will save them, they will say it's good for you. Yes, of course the U.S. currency can be debased and I mean, this is the way the world works. If you ask me one thing to own that I couldn't have, it would be silver for me right now. But back to your points, silver historically has been the basis for, in China, it was not gold, it was silver. All their transactions were in silver 80 years ago. You go back to the U.S. When the U.S. was founded, it was founded on a silver base, the basis of a silver currency. They changed that later. You may remember in the 1890s, was this whole thing, "You shall not crucify mankind on a cross of gold," because the U.S. was changing from silver to gold. And a lot of people got very, very agitated. But the U.S. system had been based on silver. You remember Christ was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Wow. He was not sold for 30 pieces of gold. Yeah. Silver has been the basis for money in many parts of the world for many times in world history. Now, to your point, there's not enough silver now. I don't see how that can possibly happen unless silver was suddenly valued at, 100,000, 10,000 an ounce or something. No, there's not enough at the moment. But silver has been used in many countries, many sections of the world, throughout world history, as the basis for money.